to introduce our next speaker. Here is Henry Randolph.
Good morning, everybody. So we're really pleased now to introduce Dr. Kendra Sticka, who's Associate Dean for Clinical Health Sciences at UAA's College of Health. Dr. Sticka today is going to be discussing how to approach the competitive admissions process. You know, there are a lot of health programs and health-related programs that have an admissions process that is competitive. So Dr. Sticka is going to be discussing that. She's also going to talk about how and why to keep an open mind as you explore career options and really find the best fit for you in terms of both a degree program and a career. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sticka.
Thank you, Henry. In just 1 minute, I will share my screen here. Okay, I think I have my PowerPoint on the screen, but if anybody thinks I don't, feel free to let me know. Thanks, Henry, for the introduction and kind of, you know, a lead in from imposter syndrome to, or imposter phenomenon into this idea of, well, what if I don't get in? So in some ways I was thinking through that, you know, it is always sort of scary thinking about applying to a program that you may or may not get in. So as Henry said, I'm Kendra Sticka, Associate Dean of Clinical Health Sciences. So I work with a lot of our programs in the college that do have competitive and selective admissions processes. And earlier at UAA, before I moved into other positions, and then this position, I was the program director for the Bachelor's in Dietetics, which does have a competitive application process. So part of my role there was to run that application process, and I had sort of this mixed bag of getting the great opportunity to tell students that they had been selected for the program when they applied, and on the flip side, the very challenging task, I guess, of telling students that they weren't selected for the program that they applied to, and then really helping them think through what those next steps look like. So today I'm hoping that I can share a little bit of those insights with you, my experience both with that as well as other programs to help you kind of think through that. So the first thing I want to say is congratulations. Congratulations for being here and for thinking about how you move forward in something that has an uncertain end. And again, I think Dr. Sturgis's presentation just now was fantastic in terms of really thinking about you know, going down a road, and even Dean Jesse in his welcome, sometimes we don't know what the end is going to look like, but really complimenting you and congratulating you for taking those steps in that direction, even if you're not certain what the end looks like. So I assume most of you are listening to this presentation either because it's in the mix of everything else that's here, or that you either intend to apply to a program that has a competitive application process, or perhaps you've already applied and not gotten accepted and now trying to figure out what are your next steps. So I just kind of start with a quote that I actually for the first time heard from a student, which is, you know, sometimes where I think my best learning has occurred is from students that I've worked with over the years. But I love this quote because I really do think it's where we get to that edge of our comfort, and sometimes that means, you know, not getting into a program that we thought we really wanted to do, or at least trying down a path that we don't know is certain. And I do think that's really where we start to kind of get into what I think of as the good stuff of learning in life. So I love this quote, and I also, again, always love the things that I learn from students. So before we talk about the idea of what do I do if I don't get in, let's back up a step to sort of navigating competitive application processes. So that hopefully, you know, ideally you don't have to cross that bridge about what to do if you don't get in. We'll talk about that, but let's start a little bit first about navigating the process. So first of all, I have a few points on the screen here that I'll talk a little bit about that may seem simplistic, but in my experience in working with students and applications, sometimes it's easy to get overlooked. We get busy. You know, and we get kind of one thing in our mind and forget to sort of look at different pieces. So I'm going to talk about these a little bit, not that they're earth-shattering, but really they are important. So firstly, really looking at, whatever posted information there is. So carefully read what's there. I think we've gotten to where there's so much written information. Sometimes we scan through it quickly and we don't really read carefully. So really looking at the information that's available in terms of, what's required. All sorts of programs have different types of things that they require. Usually, there's always going to be some sort of a grade or transcript type of piece. Sometimes there's interviews, letters of recommendation, personal statements, all the different pieces. So really read carefully through that information, and particularly for timelines, so that you're very mindful of those timelines and what's required. That's especially important if those requirements require you to have someone else be involved. So for example, if you need to get a letter of recommendation, making sure that you give those people plenty of lead time to write you a quality letter. The next bullet I have in here is talking to a program advisor, or, different programs have different people who might be able to meet with you. Sometimes in smaller programs, it's the program director. But finding out who you can talk to in that program about the application process. And I think this is really critical, because although there's always going to be written, published information about the application process, I think when you talk to someone who works with students applying and works with students in the past who have gotten in or not gotten in, they can give you a bit more detail. Apologize, I just saw something pop up in the chat. Please, somebody just jump in if there's something. I tend to not see that, so jump in if there's something I need to tend to in the chat. But so the program advisor or someone working with the admissions can really talk about sort of what I think is the softer side of the application process. So there's certainly published information, but they can say, well, what we've seen from students that get in, typically they have this or that, or here are some things you might consider in your application. So I think that conversation, in addition to reading the posted information, is really important. And then the last thing on here is don't procrastinate. And I know we all, we all are busy, we leave things to the end, but typically admissions deadlines are posted well in advance. Often they're the same year after year. There's a standard date. And because they're published well ahead, my own experience as a program director, as well as I think many others, is there's not necessarily a lot of sympathy if someone waits till the very last second and they have a tech problem. So really make sure you plan ahead. I would recommend setting your own deadlines. So, if there's a certain deadline, maybe a week ahead of that, you say, that's when I'm going to submit, or whatever it is. So if there is some sort of glitch or issue, you still have some wiggle room in there. Because I think part of the application process is, it's the content, it's what you put into it, but it's also a demonstration of your skills in organization and following a process and those sorts of things. So it's a good time for you to be able to sort of shine with that. So those are just kind of some general things in terms of navigating the process and making sure that you're well prepared to move through a selective application process. So again, as I mentioned, every application process is going to be a little bit different in terms of what's required. So once you know that, then you can hone in on certain areas. But some typical things that are in applications that you may want to consider and think about, areas that you feel pretty strong in, and areas of this that you may need to think a little bit more about. So first of all, many applications have some sort of interview process. Sometimes everybody interviews, sometimes you go through sort of an initial selection process, and then the stage 2 sort of thing, or maybe stage 3 is an interview. Sometimes that interview is in person, sometimes it's online, sometimes it's with multiple people. So there's all different ways that interviews are done. But some people are super natural at interviewing. Most people do well with a little bit of preparation and building their interviewing skills. So this is certainly something that I think, if you're looking at a program that has an interview, it's worth building those skills, and it's worth preparing for that. Not to the point that you feel like you have, just these canned answers. That's not the intent, but really making sure that you feel ready to project what you want to project in your interview. As far as written materials, most of the time you'll have something written that needs turned in. That may be a more in-depth personal statement or a writing, something written, or it may just be very basic information. This is an area that I think it's really important to check and double check and triple check and have someone else check, because written materials are something that can easily, a reviewer can easily be sort of keyed into even a small error. A small spelling error really can jump out at someone reading those materials. So I think this is the written materials, you really want to be pretty excellent there and hopefully not have errors, because typically you do have the opportunity to have someone else read it and check that. So make sure you take advantage of that opportunity. If the program you're looking at requires references, this is a conversation I've had with a lot of students in terms of who do I choose? Who should I ask to be a reference for me? Sometimes programs will specify that they want to see, for example, at least one reference from someone in the academic world, whether that be a professor or advisor or something like that. And other programs leave it more loose. So I wouldn't say there's hard and fast rules here, but just a few things to keep in mind. First is that unless they specifically ask for this, I would steer away from anyone who's just really a personal reference. So hopefully most people have someone who could say something nice about them, but your reviewers typically really want to look at what your skills are in the academic and/or professional setting. As you come into programs, some of you may have a whole host of work and professional experience and people from that world that could write you letters. Some of you may be coming directly out of high school with very little work experience, or your academic experience maybe with professors that you just have one class from, so you don't feel as connected to. In those cases, sometimes you have to stretch outside a little bit, but I think really thinking about people who can speak to those skills, such as, responsibility and attention to detail, and the skills that you are going to need moving forward in your program of choice, your people skills, your interpersonal skills, those sorts of things. So thinking about how they could speak to those things. And when you ask someone to write you a letter, it certainly is acceptable, and I think it's a very good idea to let them know not only what you're applying to, but some of the things that program is looking for, so that hopefully the person writing the letter can speak to that. So if the program you are applying to has really emphasized, you get the sense there's an emphasis on those interpersonal skills, then perhaps the person writing your letter could really speak to that. If they really have an emphasis on your engagement in the community, then maybe the person writing your letter can speak to that as appropriate. So certainly okay to guide the people writing your letters as to what specific things would be helpful for them to highlight. My next bullet is personal statements. Some programs will ask you to write some sort of a personal statement or a letter of application that has sort of that personal statement element in it. And again, none of these are hard and fast rules about what to do and not to do. My experience in reviewing quite a lot of letters over the years and how people present that is that I think reviewers, we're in health, we're in a people profession, we work with people. And so I think being able to show your, show your personality, show a little bit of what makes you you is drawing to people writing a letter. I think that brings people in, and I think that's great. However, sometimes it can get too personal. So I think, again, not a hard and fast rule, but this is an area you might want to have someone read and sort of do a check-in. Often what I hear from students is they choose a field in health because of some personal experience in life. They may have had a personal health situation, or a family member go through something, or a personal social situation that has really driven them to that area. And those are absolutely valuable personal things that brought you to that, and certainly can be appropriate to share a piece of that. If it gets too much in detail about your personal situation, sometimes it can actually detract from the rest of your application. So it's just something to be aware of, that if you're going to put a little bit of that personal piece in your personal statement or letter, to just think about where that comfortable line is and how that might be perceived to a reviewer. Again, not hard and fast, but just some things to think about. And then this last statement, actually, as I was listening to Dr. Sturgis's presentation on imposter phenomenon, I thought about this as well, that it really, you do want to be you. So in this process, don't, and particularly if you have susceptibility to imposter phenomenon, I think it's easy to try and say the answer they're looking for, the right answer is whatever, and trying to speak to that. And I would really discourage you from that. Be you, because who you are brings something to that program. And so you really want to shine, but be the best version of you. So certainly have someone read through your written materials so that you're articulating what you want to well. As you practice interviewing skills and questions, don't try to give someone else's answer, but have someone help you hone your answer that it really articulates what you want to say. So don't try not to be you, just be the best version of you. So in the perfect world, some of these things, navigating the process, having a great interview, great written materials, all of those things would lead to you getting a letter or an email that says, congratulations, you've been accepted to whatever program it is you have been wanting into. Unfortunately, occasionally, we still get the letter that starts with, "We're sorry to inform you," and pretty much everything after that in the letter is probably a blur. So then the question becomes, what now? I think the first thing is that it's important to give yourself a chance to be disappointed, to be mad, to be sad, sometimes to be embarrassed, frustrated, all kinds of emotions. Again, as we work with students who are sitting in this situation, I think there's a lot of different emotions. Most people have poured a lot of time, money, effort into the program that they were planning to move forward with. And so getting that letter that says it's not going to happen right now is really hard. And everybody has that a little, takes that a little bit differently. So give yourself a chance to work through that emotional piece that's very normal and healthy and real. And then start to think about what's next. So the thing that I think is really important is that as you work through that emotion, and again, this really relates to what Dr. Sturgis spoke about, this isn't a reflection of you as a failure, you as a not good enough. It's more often than not, it's simply there are not enough seats. And I know when I was doing the selection process for the dietetics program, the one thing I have to say, in my program director role, the piece that I hated was having to sit with students and tell them that they hadn't been accepted. And I think the reason I hated it was because I can't think of a single situation where there was a student that just really didn't, quote unquote, deserve to be in the program or didn't have what it took to be successful. It was just simply there were not enough spaces. And so we had to have some process to decide who would have a space and who wouldn't. So I think it's really, really important that you don't internalize that as a failure on your part. So as you start thinking about what the next steps might be, I kind of take it as, I think you have to shift that mindset and, I know this is easier said than done, because again, I recognize this is not an easy, it's not an easy seat to sit in when you've kind of gotten that news, but really approaching those next steps with curiosity rather than self-judgment. So as we talk about kind of the next few slides I have that are suggestions, they're things that have been helpful to some students, but it's important that you approach them with that sense of curiosity and not, beating yourself up. So the first piece I would say is really kind of assess your own application for both strengths and what I would consider areas of development. If you have the opportunity, I would absolutely recommend that you talk to the program director or advisor or whoever it is in the program. Again, that varies depending on the program and program size. Talk about your application with them. What were the strengths in your application and what were the areas that would need to be developed for you to be a more competitive applicant? Even if at the end of the day you decide you're going to move on to a different program, the insights you get from that conversation can help you move forward. It's a piece of the learning experience. So I would really encourage you, I would view that as an opportunity to have a conversation with them about your application. And as you have that conversation, I think it's also a time to think about, how do you feel about those areas for development? Meaning, if they say X is really where your application was not as strong, is X something that you really want to build or not? Again, actually this morning in Dean Jesse's welcome, he talked about how he started out as a chemistry major. And I know him quite well, and I'm quite certain if he wanted to do chemistry, he is fully capable that he could have completed his chemistry degree. But in his path forward, he mentioned that he had to repeat calculus, and it's not that he couldn't do that, but maybe he decided that, this is just not what makes my, heart go pitter patter. This isn't what I want to keep going forward. We probably don't want to tell him that I talked about his heart going pitter patter, but anyway, that's a different thing. But approaching it with curiosity. Again, it's not saying, oh, I'm just no good at that, I can't do it. But is that really the area that you like doing? Are you excited about moving forward in a major that's a big piece of it? And that could be an academic piece. That could be an interpersonal piece if the program really emphasizes a lot of working with people and talking with people and doing all that, and you just find that kind of exhausting. Well, maybe there's something different that's a better fit. So I think it's really looking at not only where you were strong and not strong, but in those areas for development, are those areas that you say, yeah, I like that and I want to get better in that area? Or is that an area that you go, yeah, I'd be happy if I never had to do that thing again in my whole life? And in that case, maybe a shift is a good piece. That's a good plan. The next piece that I would say is just some personal reflection. And I guess I sort of spoke to this a little bit already, but really thinking, thinking about those areas of strength. The second bullet on here I have is, what appeals to you about your major of choice? So I think for most of us, when we chose a major, or when we choose a career field, some of it might be about the day-to-day sort of duties or tasks that we would do in that job. So we kind of think of what would that look like every day? What would I be doing every day? And some of that may be part of it, but particularly early on, as you're thinking about majors and programs, my guess is that some of it is also sort of the softer part of it. It's like, I want to do this because I really like helping people figure out issues, or I really like taking a complex problem and solving it, or whatever it is. Maybe there's something about the work environment that just is exciting to you, that makes you feel like I can just see myself in that work environment. So I think as you reflect back on what drove you to the major that you chose, what drove you to that program that you applied to and maybe got the letter saying, not this time, and are there other programs that maybe have some of that same appeal? I think most of us don't realize the breadth of careers there are that are still in health. And so really exploring, maybe there's something else that really gets at the heart of what you wanted to do, why you chose that major in the first place. Again, it's not to say you might not end up right back at the first major you chose, but I think it's worth a little bit of personal reflection in terms of really what's driving that. There's some tools, some online tools, surveys, sort of personality type things, excuse me, that can help you with some of that as well and help you sort of dig in and say, what are some other areas? What is it that really drives me? So kind of thinking about that. And then my next slide is really what I would consider very practical questions that you might want to consider. So this first bullet, I think can happen honestly sort of anywhere along the way. And ideally, maybe very early as you're considering health programs. And some of you here may be just getting ready to consider a program at UAA, just starting school in the fall. Maybe some of you are very early in your program. And I think it's a great time to be thinking about, what are all the possibilities that I can possibly imagine having on the table as options for me as far as a major or a career field? And how far down the road can I get before I really have to sort of lock myself into one or another? So for a lot of programs, there's classes that are very similar early on. So trying to kind of keep flexible in there. Maybe if you have chosen one major, but you want to keep flexible, if there's any elective room, you think about choosing electives that would align with another program. As you kind of look at various programs, if they have, for example, expectations of some clinical hours requirements, how can you start to build that on the side a little bit as you pursue something? So really thinking about, I'm a big fan of keeping doors open. My background is as a dietitian, and I used to share with students a lot that I told them I have professional ADD because I've done a lot of different jobs within dietetics, and I've enjoyed that. It's something I've loved about the field of dietetics, is that I've been able to do a lot of different things without having to totally change career fields. And so I'm a big fan of keeping doors open. You never know, what might be on the other side. The other thing is that the second bullet here, I think everybody has a different personal comfort level with uncertainty. People also are in very different situations in terms of family, finances, those types of things, as far as how far down an uncertain road they can go before it becomes too stressful or too not practical. And there's no right or wrong answer here, but I think it's worth assessing. For example, if you applied to a program and didn't get in, are you comfortable with continuing whatever that means? It's going to be different programs, but maybe taking a few more classes, maybe retaking a couple classes if appropriate, maybe building some work skills, whatever it might be, and then applying to that program again the next time it comes available? Or are you at a point that you feel like I can't have that uncertainty for that next period of time, and I really need to shift to something that has a more certain end, or an end that I have more control over? So just something, again, approaching it with curiosity. It's not a right or wrong, but I think it's good to really think about where you are on that, just sort of that personal comfort with uncertainty in that particular situation. So now that you've really kind of thought about your strengths and your areas for development, and whether those are areas you really want to develop, or you feel like maybe you want to develop a different area, you've done some self-reflection about your goals, why you chose the major in the first place, if those still stand, or maybe life and your priorities and goals and interests have changed over that time. And you've kind of asked yourself those very practical questions. Now it's time to decide, now what? What do I do next? And you are going to be the one that has to determine what that next step means. Whether, again, you reapply for the program that you originally chose, whether you look at other majors, whether you look at other schools, whatever that next step might be. And I think the important thing is to recognize there's no one right answer for now what, or what you do next, but really approaching it with self-reflection, with curiosity, without judgment on yourself. And while we all have people around us who have their ideas, really thinking about what it is that's right for you. And certainly talking to people around you, whether that's advisors, counselors, family, teachers, there's people who can kind of weigh in and help you think through, but really using them to help you weigh in on what's right for you, not having them tell you what might be right for them. And then you make your choice and really look at this as a learning experience and a growth experience, because typically that really is what it ends up being. So as you move forward, really wish you best of luck on your journey. And again, Dean Jesse mentioned this morning, but in the College of Health, one of our biggest priorities, well, I would venture to say our biggest priority, is to support you as students in moving through your program to your next steps in your life. So it's exciting for us. We have, our state has a desperate need for more people working in all aspects of healthcare. And so there's lots of opportunities for you, and we would like to be able to support you on that journey. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for attending the summit. And I'm happy to have any questions, or it might be time for a break, but thanks again for your participation.
Thank you, Dr. Sticka. If anybody has questions about Dr. Sticka's talk, please feel free to enter them in the chat and we will ask them. If you're maybe thinking about the talk and just sort of processing, you can always put questions in the chat later, and we can get them to Dr. Sticka and get an answer for you.
Thanks, everyone. Definitely, again, just appreciate your attendance, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Lots of good presentations, and actually the panel discussions, I think, are an excellent opportunity to sort of have a sneak peek at a number of the programs that are available here in the college. So have a great rest of the day and enjoy your time.
Thank you again, Dr. Sticka. I just wanted to quickly note that in the chat, you'll see a link to the College of Health's Student Success Center website. And if you have questions about a specific academic program at the College of Health, and you click that link, if you're looking to talk to an academic advisor, as Dr. Sticka mentioned early in her talk, that link is going to tell you the right way to get in contact with an advisor at the Student Success Center to get that question about that academic program answered. So I just wanted to call attention to that as well. Thank you, Chris, for putting that link in the chat again. You'll see that is the newest link there. Great, and we're going to turn it back over to Elida.